All right. And I think we are live here. Christopher, thank you. Thank you for joining on this here. And everybody here, I know people are joining in as we kind of go along here. So I'm going to let you all settle in for like a minute or two because it's 7:59. And then I'll kind of kick off with the introduction. I was just telling Christopher that, I started my YouTube account early this year. I started my BookTube account last year. And I've never kind of dreamed of, kind of hopping into this and doing this, especially with an author who, I really, admire, at least from this year. I'm not going to say I was a fan last year, Christopher, because I didn't read your books last year, but I picked up Empire of Silence this year and it's been amazing. So,
Yeah, well, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. So,
yeah, yeah, cool. So again, this should be recorded. So I'm going to kick off here with just a little bit of introduction. So I see everybody's in here in the chat. You are all active. This is awesome. So welcome everyone to Smitty's YouTube channel. You know me as Smitty. Started this a few months ago, and I have been enjoying the growth as well as the dialogue around some pretty cool books. One of those books being, the Sun Eater series, which is absolutely incredible. And we'll kind of go dive in there. As always, we will do our best. We will do our best to stay away from spoilers here because I know I have people who are new to Sun Eater and want to know more about Sun Eater, want to know about the authors, and we're going to stay away as much as possible from spoilers as we can. And we'll try to save time at the end for some questions from anybody from there. Again, we may run into some time issues, and then from that aspect, just hit me up and I can see if I can ask Chris for that from there. Like I said, this is my first live interview on this platform, and I'm super excited to have an author of one of my newest favorite series of all time, Sun Eater. But let me give him a proper introduction. So Christopher Ruocchio is the international award-winning author of the Sun Eater series, a series blending elements of both science fiction and fantasy, as well as more than 20 works of short fiction, which I did not know, Christopher. I did not know. A graduate of North Carolina State University, he sold his first novel, Empire of Silence, at 22 years old, which is crazy. And his books have appeared in 5 languages. He curated 8 short story anthologies for Baen Books, including Sword and Planet, Time Troopers, and World's Long Lost. His work has also appeared in Marvel Comics. We are all here to talk about Sun Eater, though. Christopher, welcome.
yeah, thanks for having me. And hey, everybody, I see some familiar names in the chat there. Good to see you guys.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So like I said, welcome. Let's kind of talk Sun Eater, but before we get into like the specific questions that I had here, can you just give us a spoiler-free overview of Sun Eater? Like if you were to describe Sun Eater to somebody passing an elevator, how would you describe it?
Yeah, sure. So my usual spiel at conventions is that Sun Eater is a science fantasy adventure, sort of in the tradition of Star Wars or Dune, and it's set 20,000 years in our future, not a galaxy far, far away. And the story of a man named Hadrian. He is a nobleman. He runs away from home in this big galactic empire, and he gets stuck against his will, really, in the middle of a war between human empire and an alien species called the Cielson, who are the first aliens who, in all that future history, have ever posed a threat to humanity. His story is about ending that war. He tells you page 1, he ended the war and dealt with the Cielson. Stories why and how, and about all the things that didn't make it into the official record. I like to joke that he's sort of like Anakin Skywalker if becoming Darth Vader was his best available option, but sort of the quick pitch. So
yeah, no, I love that there. And again, there are 6 books out right now. We'll get into 7th book and everything like that from there, but how are you feeling right now? Before we kind of dive into, how are you feeling about right now about all the praise that this series is getting?
It's good, right? Like I don't read reviews as much as I can help it. I look at the numbers, right? But I try not to read any sort of individual opinion, just because the nature of feedback on anything, right, is that like the positive stuff will go in one ear and come out the other, and the negative stuff will just ruin your day. And so it's just not like worth it. Like if I go too deep reading reviews and I hit too many negative ones, like it's just hard to get back to work,
Yeah.
So I don't look at that too much, but the real like measurable impact of BookTube and TikTok in the last year has been, frankly, has been financial, right? Like my wife quit her job and can stay home with our daughter, which is an amazing gift, and I'm very grateful to my readers, each and every one of you, for making that possible. My daughter gets both of her parents every day, which is like super rare in 2024. So thank you. And then, but then like the sort of like, oh, Christopher, like your books are so wonderful, right? Like, it's nice to hear, but when I'm writing, I try not to think about any of it. I just sort of try
Mm,
to be with the text, because you don't want to start getting high on your own supply, right?
yeah.
You gotta just let the art do its thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, and listen, it's now it is all over, book talk. And as
yeah.
much as I know a lot of my viewers here are going to say that I was the reason behind that, I have to shout out a few people, and I told them I was going to shout them out. I have to shout out Elizabeth, who was one of the first people who
Oh
told
yeah.
me to get into this series. I have to shout out Jonah and Izzy and so many more. Because it's not just me who, is talking about this series, this absolutely incredible series that honestly needs to be talked about more. Those are a few people who both before and after me have been pushing this series so much, and I have to give a shout out to them. If they're on here, great. If not, I'll let them know that I shout them out in here. So, Sun Eater, what were your major influences behind Sun Eater?
The big ones are like real obvious, right? Like I grew up a Star Wars kid. I was basically the youngest person possible to remember Star Wars prequels. I remember Phantom Menace coming out. I was like 5-ish or something, right? My dad had the laser discs of the original trilogy, so I watched the original like unlucased, unspecial edition versions of those movies like 100 times as a kid. So my parents were really careful about what I was allowed to consume, right,
Mm,
media wise,
yep.
particularly visual media. Books that were kind of open season,
Yeah.
which is a dangerous game, but they knew Star Wars, so I was allowed Star Wars, and I went broke watching Star Wars. And then sometime in middle school, I got into Dune. Was that a friend? Actually, the guy Gibson is named after who
Mm,
gave Dune to me
hmm.
when I was in
Awesome.
7th grade, and so Dune's like probably the single like biggest touchstone with Sun Eater because Dune is about the dangers of charismatic leaders and heroes, right? And that never rung true for me, right? Like obviously there are risks associated with charisma, right? But like, you know, um, we also need heroes,
Yeah.
right? Actually, at the same time, right? And Frank Herbert's writing a cautionary tale about like fascist dictators, but like we also had charismatic leaders fighting those guys, right?
Yeah.
So it felt like that was too simple. And if you're hearing an infant in the background,
Yeah.
she
All
is
good.
protesting going to sleep, I think. But so that was the big one. But then Tolkien, as far as like craft and stuff, Tolkien's probably my single greatest influence. I've read Lord of the Rings 100 times in my life.
Mm,
I read it like every year at this point, and I was the only audiobook I owned for a long time, so I just listened to it on loop for years as a kid. Fell asleep listening to it.
mm,
But then there's some like other major threads too. I grew up like an anime kid. We didn't call them weebs
mm.
yet, but I grew up with Toonami and
Yeah.
Adult
Tsunami.
Swim
Yeah.
and yeah, and like the 90s and the aughts, right? And
Yeah.
so between that and like video games, RPGs,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of influence from that sort of side of things in my work, I think as well. Don't talk about that as much, but as always, we go back to Dune, and for good reason.
Yeah.
But then, like, there's some later stuff too. Gene Wolfe, I'm sure people are tired of hearing me sing Gene Wolfe's praises. I think he's the best science fiction writer of all time,
Okay.
and huge influence on me. But a very late influence. I came to Gene Wolfe actually when I was editing Empire of Silence, and there was no going back. So
Yeah. 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 No, that's awesome. And you can kind of see those influences. You mentioned, Dune, you mentioned Star Wars, you mentioned all of that there. But I also want to tag on with like some of the fantasy books that you read too as well, right?
yeah.
And what I love about Sun Eater, especially when I tell people all the time, like when a writer hits their stride, you just kind of know they're hitting their stride. And what I love about Sun Eater is that it mixes that science fiction and that fantasy so well, like so well. And those are my two favorite genres. Well, fantasy, again, I don't know if you like sci-fi more, so hopefully I'm not.
Oh
Hopefully
no
I'm
no
not
no!
either. I
I
love fantasy
controversially
more.
think they're the same genre. I
Yeah,
get in fights about this.
yeah. But I have like fantasy here. I have sci-fi like battling because of this series, battling like every day to like kind of overtake it. But so my question to you is like, was it a deliberate choice from the outset? Because again, not going to spoilers, if you read like the first few books, the first book and a half, like it's really science fiction, and then all of a sudden it kind of like changed from there, which I think is when the series takes off. So was this a deliberate choice from the outset, or like how do you balance like between those two genres?
Yeah, so yes and no. I never really saw a sharp division between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of because of the anime influence, right? Because Japanese
Yeah,
science fiction and fantasy, broadly, they just don't care. Like they'll put a robot in the middle of their
true,
medieval story, like no
true.
problem, and it's awesome, right?
Yeah,
And so it never really bothered me. I figured, you can put chocolate and peanut butter all day, it's fine.
yeah.
But then on sort of like a higher level, and this is sort of like something that didn't come to me until like midway through, like after book 2 or something.
Yeah.
A lot of fantasy stories are about sort of the disenchantment of the world, right? The passing of magic into sort of like mundane reality, right? And I realized that what I was sort of writing was the opposite of that. It was like a reenchantment of the future, right? Because we live in this very like demystified age, right? But humanity, most of its existence did not live this way, right? And I tend to disagree with most science fiction writers that there's this sort of idea that like our march toward the future is linear, right? Like we're only moving in one direction. Actually, if you look at history, that's just not how it works, right? There's there are boom bust cycles. Things swing back and forth. They change. And we live in a very strange time. And so it seems to me that the future might resemble the past in certain ways, and is more likely to resemble the past in certain ways than we might like to think, or might think at all. And I wanted to sort of steer in that direction. So there's maybe a philosophical impetus behind some of that, but I also there was also some cynical reasoning to this too. Fantasy is a much larger genre. There are a lot more readers of fantasy. Science fiction has a not undeserved reputation for being harder. Just people like, do I need to know quantum physics to read this book? I'm not sure I'm qualified. And the answer is like usually no, but every now and then there's that writer where like, yeah, man, you better have studied. Like, big Alistair Reynolds fan, but sometimes a little homework helps. But I wanted to write a science fiction story because I like space. I like science fiction stories, but I wanted it to feel like a fantasy story for cynical marketing reasons. I wanted it to be accessible to that larger audience who are like, hey, science fiction sounds cool and all, but every time I read it, I get hit with a math test, and I wanted to take the math homework out. I try. Obviously, there's some pretty fantastic stuff in the books, but I try also to nod at science, right, and to ground some things while also breaking other rules, so that it's not, it's not a complete 180 from reality. It's maybe 90 degrees off or something like that, so that you can do both, and so that this feels plausibly like a future that is reenchanted to some degree, right? Without going all the way in, there's not like space elves or something like that. Although that would be cool. But yeah, so it's not something I think about in the writing because the world is sort of locked in at this point. But these were sort of conscious decisions in the first stages, and then I really understood what I was trying to do sort of on the way, right? Sort of like the like book equivalent of like not knowing where your sentence is going. You're talking, you try to make a point in an argument. You're like, oh, there it is, right? And then once you figure out where you're going, it's easier to stick the landing. So
and again, I'm a fan of Dune. There's other space operas out there, but I mean, you're right. Like sometimes, and even me as a reader who like enjoys like some of this stuff, sometimes sci-fi is a little bit harder to get into. Even like late, like this year, probably sci-fi is getting a better read on. Like you got Rising, you have this, you have all this stuff. But when somebody says sci-fi, it's like, ooh, I don't know. Like, am I right for this? And I think fantasy is more open, but like a book, like a series like this, it's like, listen, you don't need to know, like you said, quantum physics. You don't need to know like the intricacies of black holes. You just got to know that there is a dope main character who is battling for his life and is trying to figure out what is going on, what his purpose is in the entire universe. And I love how you bridge that gap, because so many people come up to me and say, listen, I never thought I'd pick up a series like this because it is sci-fi, but like I'm all in. Like I'm all in, which is, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, well, thanks. I do think that's a big part of it too. I think that science fiction traditionally, so science fiction's been through a lot of sort of periods in its history, right? There are all these little movements, and it's a thing that's not really well understood anymore because science fiction fans have been very poor keepers of their own history. There's like very little sort of pop history about fan culture, right? Like most people like my age or younger like don't know that the word fandom originated with like one specific group, right? It's the people who went to the World Science Fiction Convention every year. They were fandom, like single capital F one thing. Now we just use the word generically, right? But like you don't even know that, right? And that's very basic. Science fiction in the 40s, 50s went through, and into the 60s, early 60s, went through what they call the golden age, right? And in the golden age, that's when the genre is dominated by these sort of engineer hero stories, right? You got like Asimov's like this, Clark's like this, Heinlein's like this, right? They're very technical, right? The hero is a scientist who's doing science things. and who they are as characters is usually not very important. The thing that's important is the idea of the story.
Yeah.
And the problem, some of those stories are great, right?
Yeah.
But some of them aren't. And what happened was the editors who were sort of driving the magazines at the time, because it was really a short story kind of period, were that's what they wanted, and they weren't going to publish anything else. You know, there wasn't an indie market, so they got to really set the tone. You know, it's sort of the same way that like the princes in the Renaissance, like, we're only buying religious artwork actually, and so if you're making anything else, like, we don't want it in our palace, right? So like there's a impression that you get a lot of like cultural unity from that period. And that's still what people think of when they think of science fiction. If they take Star Trek and Star Wars out, they think finned rocket ships and like claw hand robots, and like engineers solving problems. And that changes like pretty dramatically in the 60s with writers like Herbert and Le Guin. But like so science fiction has not been that way for a really long time, actually, even though it's got some of the technical stuff still. But like character became more important a long time ago, and it was more important before then too, if like in the early pulp era. But it's still never gotten out from that impression. And so you know, when you write a first person narrative, there's no getting away from character. So you know, I was able to dodge that bullet pretty easy, I think.
Yeah, and you know, that leads right into like my next thing. You know, I did a list the other day, and again, I've read many books in my in my whatever how old I am life, and Hadrian Marlowe, he just keeps popping up here. Again, there's times I love him, there's times I hate him, and while one of my favorite characters, he is like a very complex one. How did you go about crafting, you know, Hadrian Marlowe? Like, did his arc evolve naturally as you wrote the series, or did you have a clear path from him from the beginning? Besides the obvious one, because again, this is not a spoiler, everyone. You can read the first page, you can read synopsis. This guy blows up a sun. It's not a spoiler. Like, that's not a spoiler at all. It's called Sun Eater for a reason. So that's the obvious path that you have him on. But like, kind of talk me through that.
Yeah. So in part, like, some of the stuff was already there, right? Like, I knew who I wanted it to be at the beginning. I know where he's going, right? But like, what does that look like, right? In terms of like little epicycles and arcs and things, like, you know, that a lot of that you figure out along the way.
Yeah.
And here mostly I've had a lot of help simply by the fact that there are these big time jumps between most of the books.
Yeah.
And so he's a different person really every time, right? And I've always the first question when I start writing the outline for the next book is like, where is he, right? Emotionally, developmentally, right? And in so doing, he literally is a new character for me, sort of every time. Now the narrator voice is sort of there, and but the thing about that is that it's really that's more of like an emergent thing, right? That happens as you're writing, and because the narrator isn't narrator version of Hadrian, the guy who's writing the story, isn't present to the same degree the character is. So like it's not, there's not as much thinking about that needs to happen. It's really thinking about the scene in the moment that he's writing about that's important. Because then like his attitude towards whatever's happening sort of jumps at me automatically, right? As I'm writing. So I don't worry about that so much. But each book I usually think about, okay, he's like this old, and like this stuff has happened to him, right? And he's in this place, and these, you know, things have changed him. So I usually, with each book, I've sat down and thought about that, and I've thought about how the book is tonally different from the other ones, right? Or how like maybe there's a, you know, we say genre's not quite the right word, but there's like a subgenre flavor to each book, right? The second book is a lot more gothic than the first one. It's a lot more cyberpunk. The third one's like got a more of a political adventure thriller thing to it. You know, and so like each book I've like sort of twiddled the knobs, changed the mix.
And by the way, the fourth one is just absolutely devastating.
It's very horrible. No, 4 is like dystopian fiction horror. Sad. Yes. I should have written it in Russian. But I can't do. But you know, joking aside, I always like change the mix. The one time that wasn't really true was with books 4 and 5, because they split that one in half on me. Like, it was the same book originally.
Got it.
But that's why there's no gap between those books. It wasn't supposed to be a break at all. But publishing happens. So so it's sort of like that. I take it one book at a time, and a lot of like the little like quirks and stuff. Those things sort of recommend themselves when you write scenes. You know, if the character's doing a certain thing, like I don't know, like they're drinking tea. Like, how does this character feel about tea? I've never thought about that before because I've never had to. And then you pick a rule and you stick to it, right? Like Hadrian hates tea, for example.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
every time it comes up, it's like, not again. And a lot of world building and character building are like that. You meet it in the moment and then you just stick with it, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to know everything in advance, right? It's okay to sort of discover things along the way, even if you're an outliner. And I'm like a very meticulous outliner, but stuff like that's not important enough to outline, you know?
Mhm.
So you just have to keep it sort of in active memory. And that's the tricky part, is not
Yeah.
forgetting things, but
Yeah.
that's what editing is for. So
Yeah. 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 And his voice is just very distinctive. Like whether you listen to an audiobook or you read it, like you can hear his voice with it. Like kind of how'd you settle on that? Like I feel like more like most main characters, they have like this distinctive style and tone. And with him, it's like he's very philosophical.
sure.
And he takes 1,000 years to get to the point, but also he'll spoil everything for you, and then he'll still say like how do you get, as a writer, how do you get to like a character like that? Because when I authors like write first person like point of view, I'm like, are you like living this character? Like are you living in this character's shoes as you write him, instead of like writing him from somebody else's perspective? Like I'm just so curious about that.
Yeah, so I'm not like a method writer or something like that, right? I'm not
Yeah.
like mailing rats to people and
Yeah.
doing anything like that.
Yeah.
It's at this point it's mostly habit. Like I've
Yeah.
written so much as Hadrian more than any other point of view character that I've written.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of different stuff with novellas, short stories, and things,
Yeah.
but that I actually have this anxiety that Hadrian's voice is my voice at this point, and I
Okay. Okay.
like I'm worried about moving on to like the next thing, and like can I shake Hadrian? And I
Yeah.
think when I did like the first novella, I don't think he came off completely.
Okay.
I think I got better at it with the third one, which is a Lorien story. The first one's
Yeah.
his brother Crispin.
Yeah. Crispin. Yeah.
But um, when I think of the Lorien one, I think I got better at it. Short story, it's easier to get away with because there's just
Hmm.
like not enough room for people to notice.
Yeah.
But like I am prone to digressions myself. People may have noticed. So a lot of that is sort of natural, I think. But I also like I just have this weird sort of visual technique when I'm writing. I'll look at the actual page, and if I
Hmm.
notice the paragraphs are all getting really short and it's like dialogue, 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 I need
Yeah.
to break it up.
Yeah.
Like the rhythm needs to change. It's
Yeah.
like it's like music, right? Like you can't listen to just the same like two notes like monotonously over and over again. And
Yeah.
if you get too rhythmic, right, in the prose, right, it's like all staccato dialogue, just like one line, one line, one line, one line.
Hmm.
If every paragraph is starting with the word I, right, you need to do something differently. And so
Mm.
I'll look at a page and be like, is there enough variety in the paragraph openers on this page? And that's something you could see in half a second,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Are the paragraphs too small, right? Or was it like all one giant paragraph? Because you need to sometimes go back to the dialogue.
Yeah.
And I don't have any rules for that. I just sort of look at it and I say,
No,
hey,
that's good.
like this is getting too samey. Like I need to change it up. I need to reflect on something.
Yeah.
And using that, just looking at paragraph size and paragraph starts,
Yeah.
usually gives me a sense of when it's time to change the sort of pacing of the words themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really easy when you're learning to write to fall into a trap of having characters literally in a vacuum, like you're not
Mm.
describing the environment at all. They're
Mhm.
just talking, talking, talking. Because you like are really excited about the dialogue, you end up writing a screenplay, basically,
Yeah.
right? And the paragraph thing helps me at least, and I think it's probably just would work for anybody. I try not to be a one size fits all guy, but I
Yeah.
think this is just objectively useful to avoid doing that, because you're like, oh, like if all these paragraphs are short, like man, you have not described the chairs in a couple
Yeah.
pages. Like, do people know where you are anymore? You gotta
Yeah.
put them back in the cafe, right?
Yeah.
It is tea time in the scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so that helps. I think with any voice, right? But a lot of character voice though is like individual word choice, and there you start to get that starts to get more
Mm.
complicated.
Mm.
But
Yeah. So a couple of things about that. If any aspiring authors out there, like that is great advice. Like because now I'm going to be looking at these pages as I read them and see if I can go line by line and see if there's any repetition there. Like that is awesome.
yeah,
I appreciate that because you're really dealing with the intricacies of writing, but you're not only thinking about it from writing, you're thinking about, oh, if I was to read this, like, am I just reading it and I'm bored with this voice now and it's saying the same thing over again? Or, oh, like I'm 30 pages in and I forgot exactly where the scene is taking place. Like I love the way like you've done that. And it's not just you that do it, like other authors do it, but like I've seen it in your books to where it's like that's why Hadrian, as flawed as he is one of my favorite characters because it's written so well.
Yeah, well, thanks. Because if you're not careful, right, like your words can just put people to sleep, and changing the
Yeah,
rhythm like that, like as
yeah,
again, like in music, that wakes people right up,
yeah,
and that's a simple thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
So I think everybody on here can agree, and I'll be one of the first to say, you to me, one of the nicest guys that I've met, one of the nicest authors that I've
thank
met.
you.
Obviously, like the backstory for everyone here, if Elizabeth's on here or not, like you met Elizabeth at a thing, Elizabeth gave you my contact information, say, hey, like I would love to connect, and like now you're here, and you didn't have to do that at all, and like
Oh, geez, no.
you're literally one of the nicest like guys. Even emailing back and forth, even we had technical difficulty on Monday, and now we're here. But Mr. Ruocchio, where do you have to go as a writer to write some of the darkest scenes that I've ever encountered in any book? Like, and I know we're not gonna give any spoilers on here, but like there are some dark moments,
Sure.
some extremely dark moments where I'm like, this guy cannot be like human. Whoever's writing this has been through some stuff because
Nope.
this is insane. Like, how, like, where do you have to go to like get into that mode?
Well, I'm here. I'm in my chair. I no, it's really it's not that that's not hard for me at all. It's funny. I saw Elizabeth is here. Hey, Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth,
Good
hey,
to see
what's
you.
up?
Yeah, yeah. I it's funny you mentioned this. I laughed when I got the question. I told my wife about it, and she's like, "You should tell him." My father-in-law read my books, right?
Yeah.
This was like we'd been married for about 2 years. Kingdom's Death came out, and I did not know this at the time. He called my wife and was like, "Are you like okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "Have you read Christopher's books? Like, they're pretty dark, man. They're pretty messed
Yeah.
up." And he like reads a lot of science fiction,
Yeah.
But and she's like, "Yeah, it's fine. Like, what are you talking about?" I remember I did I think my second signing ever. I was at a Barnes and Noble, and my dad was coming, and the bookseller got real nervous because he thought basically Hadrian's dad was like from life, right? Like that
Yeah.
was my experience,
Yeah.
and like it couldn't be like further from the truth,
Yeah.
right? My dad's awesome,
Yeah.
and we have this sense that like one must necessarily write from personal experience, but
Mm.
that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Like imagination can get you a long way.
Yeah.
And the thing is just to take what you're doing seriously,
Yeah.
right? People uh like a question I get a lot is like on a scale of J.K. Rowling to George Martin, like how hard is it for you to kill characters, right?
Mm.
And like the answer is George Martin, like it's not hard for me at all. I don't
Yeah.
take any particular glee in it, but
Oh, jeez.
it's not an emotional experience for
Yeah.
me, right? Like I like you run into writers, who will do crazy things. They'll like demand to be brought into their book signing in a coffin or something,
Oh,
or
wow.
I won't say who that is. People probably know, it's a famous story. But they'll do like silly things, or like they can only write in their like special writing house with a
Yeah.
quill pen or something like that. But like
Yeah.
I like writing is my job, and
Yeah.
like I take like it's my job, right? Like if
Yeah.
it was being a lawyer, like I would take being a lawyer seriously, right? If I
Mm.
was a
Very
chef, I
true.
would take making food seriously.
Very
And
true.
so like I know the characters aren't real. They're not like alive in my head or something.
Yeah.
I don't have a story like Robert E. Howard said, like Conan just sort of appeared to him one day and said, "You
Yeah.
have to tell my story." It didn't happen. Like I'm in control, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I have to do things that make sense, right? Like the story, like narrative has a logic to it. The characters have logic to them, right? Like they
Yeah.
have, like they have personalities, right?
Yeah.
That need to make sense, right? And
Right.
so like my fear in writing about anything dark or serious or personal or anything is that it will be insincere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to waste your time, right, as
Yeah.
readers. And so the responsibility is is on me to do right by y'all,
Yeah.
and more than anything else. So when I go do something like kill an important character, right, my fear is not that I'm maybe treating the character with disrespect, but that I'm treating my audience with disrespect by
Mm.
making some sort of you know silly choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you, man, but you put me through the ringer with some of this stuff, man.
yeah,
Like,
I usually feel like I've not gone far enough, and then people are like, "Christopher, like you need to stop, man. You really need to dial it back." And like, I
yeah.
didn't know it was dialed, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
find it
so
pretty
funny.
cool.
So I was listening to one of your books because I do the immersion read, but I also do this
Mhm.
physical read by itself, and then sometimes do the audiobook. Now, listen to one of your books. I was coming back. I was coming back from a very good location, not going to a very good location. If I was going to a very good vacation, I would probably be sick at you. You probably wouldn't do this, but I was coming back from a very good vacation, and I was listening to one of your books here. I don't spoil it for everybody which book it is, but I listened to one of them, and man, you just hit me with left after right after left after right after left after right in terms of just the loss that
Sure.
occurred in there. And I literally had to sit down. Like I could not. I had to like because normally when you go to the airport, you try to go and like see if your gate's there. Your gate's always there, but you got to go see if your gate's there. I couldn't do it. I had to sit in the middle of that walkway and just rewind and listen to what I just listened to. You put me through some stuff, man, and I give you kudos for that because talking to you here and obviously emailing you, it's like you really go into that mode. And you're right, as a professional, like you have to go into that mode. You separate yourself from the craft. Like I'm sure you're very nice to your kids, you're very nice to your wife, you're very nice from there. But in these books, you are brutal. You are brutal.
Yeah, well, it's the job, right? But no, it's it's not me at all, right? It's like it's the thing you do.
Yeah.
But I think I know the part you mean. And when I sent it to my beta readers, one of them she sent me her Fitbit data, and I just laughed. Uh, I was like, this is an objective measure that the
Yeah.
book is good. Thank you.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
said that you can't review books objectively. Boom, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about your characters. Like, let's talk about the actual books and the story itself. So, like, do you plot your books meticulously, or like, do you allow the story to develop more as you organically write? Because again, like, you're writing series here, right?
Yeah.
Like, book one looks totally different in my eyes than book four, right? So, how do you do that?
One book at a time. I have some like major benchmarks like for across the whole series. I know I wanted to hit. I don't necessarily know what the order was,
Yeah.
or which book they would be in, but like I had a list of things I wanted to get to eventually.
Yeah.
Right, that's partly why the series got longer. It turned out it took longer to get there.
Hmm.
Um, at least partly it was publishing, but
Yeah.
but so I know that those are out there, right? Obviously, I know where the ending is because
Yeah.
I nailed that to the floor, like
Yeah.
page
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have to get there somehow. So we have to untie this knot without using either end of the string. Great, awesome, love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do outline. I did not outline book one because I was in college and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, I have infinite time. I'm in college.
Yeah.
All college students are immortal. Turns out that's
Yeah.
a lie. But I finished the book in time. I finished it my last year, and I got my contract about a month after I graduated, so it worked
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But
Awesome.
every book after that, the thing about becoming a professional writer is they usually expect you to hit deadlines, and so they're like, "You can do the
Mm.
next one in a year, right?" And I was like, "I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
Let's find out." So I
Yeah.
had to like develop a method, and I decided that after an entire academic career of never outlining a paper, that I would start outlining.
Mm.
And I've outlined ever since. And my outlines are huge. They're like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone sized.
Okay.
They're
Wow.
like
Wow.
60,000 words. But I think about them as like low resolution drafts, right? So it turns out it's a lot easier to write a chapter when it's literally this long and not
Mm.
20 pages.
Yeah.
And so, because most writer's block, I think, is simply the result of, and this is like the most obvious sentence anybody's ever said, right? It's just a result of like not knowing where the scene is going,
Mm.
right? It's not the writing that's blocked because like you could stare at the word processor all day
Yeah.
and then switch over to Facebook. I guess I'm dating myself there, but switch over to Facebook, right? See someone say something stupid and then write 3,000 words about why they're wrong, and like,
Yeah.
oh, the writing's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Writing's not blocked. It
Yeah.
was it was something else, right?
Oh, it's good to hear.
So
Yeah.
once I've outlined everything, I mostly outline plot. I don't outline. I never like make emotional notes about how
Mm.
the characters are feeling in any scene. I might make notes about like if they're hiding something, like so that I
Yeah.
don't forget that that's there. So I remember to um, make them shifty,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever, right? But I don't outline how they're feeling because that's like obvious to me when I'm writing the scene. It's like
Mm.
they would be mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
True.
but I figure out the plot basically, and I'll do that for one whole book, right? And then I will write off of that, and then usually the outline doesn't work, Something will be 2 chapters that I said was 1 chapter, and I'll have to change it. Or the reverse is true sometimes. Or sometimes I get to a sequence. This battle at the end of book 3. I had to stop and like redo the outline for the rest of the book completely, like twice, because the battle just wasn't working like logistically.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you've heard before, writers always complain about battles being very complicated.
Mm.
And like there's a lot of moving parts. So
Yeah.
you know, so sometimes like that's okay. I think people when they hear outlining, they often are like, but doesn't that like ruin the art, right? Like, don't you get locked in? You're like, you know, forced to obey this document that you created, and like actually you're still the boss. You can like change that line. It's cool. So I'll do that, and then I'll start thinking about the next book when the draft is done.
Got it.
This last book is a little bit different because it's the last book, and it's really going to be the last book. I'm not splitting it again. Or I will jump out a window. So I like really have to get everything in there, and so the book is turning like Ryan Cahill size at the moment.
Okay.
So I need to figure out how to prevent that from happening and then cut it down, because like the books are long, but like 400,000 words is really long, and I don't actually want to write that much. That's a lot of books. So
yeah, no, listen, that's awesome, and we'll be here. Listen, you can make as long as you want.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm down for it. So we mentioned earlier that Sun Eater, you know, obviously mixes fantasy and sci-fi, you know, 2 great genres, but it really also mixes like some crazy intense battle scenes, like you mentioned earlier, but also like some deep philosophical like musings, which at times it's like a needed break from like all like the action there. So how do you balance this? Because sometimes like pacing for certain books or certain people's things, like, oh, it's like pacing is off. But I feel like once you hit your stride, like the pacing is like there. Like I look forward to some of the deep philosophical things, you know, with like a Gibson or something like that. Or I look forward to, you know, Hadrian Marlowe going absolutely crazy on CLCN. But it's also like a balance. Like how do you like balance that?
Yeah, a lot of that is, so there's a sort of related mechanism to the paragraph thing, right? You know, you have a sense like I've been doing one thing long enough, I need to do the other thing, right? And it's almost instinctual, right? I just have this sense like it's time to break that up. And you know, Socrates said, right, like the difference between me and the rest of you is I listen to my conscience, right? And like in writing as in life, like it really behooves you to like listen to your gut, right? And so when I have the sense that like I need to pause, right, and take a moment, right, then you pause and take a moment. And often because like often it's useful, those philosophical passages can underline the action in useful ways if you pause between, you know, raising the sword and dropping it, right? Like that's often the right moment, right? Because there is that moment, you know, your brain is super overcharged, right? You're about to cut someone's head off, whatever, right? You might think about these things, especially if it's like, you know, an execution and not a fight scene or something like that. Like there are like the emotions of the characters inform when these pauses should take place, right? And if you're keyed into your character, right, you can sort of feel that and think, yeah, it's time. Like I have a paragraph, like we could use a paragraph here. And I find that so like action scenes are actually pretty easy for me to write once the planning is done. Like I really enjoy writing them. I really like being in them, and things just sort of go when I'm there, right? And so like the people were like, wow, the end of those books things get really really fast. It's because I tend to write them actually much faster, and I'm like able to do more at a time because I'm like really really plugged into whatever those sequences are. Things like meetings and discussions, like those take me forever. But like the big set pieces are usually much more productive, which is I understand like maybe opposite to a lot of writers actually. Like I like those big crazy set pieces I love, but then the big sort of revelatory, excuse me, chapters, like the big dialogue ones, I'll just say some proper nouns: Brethren, Horizon, Regama. Those killed me. Those are so hard in a way that, that fights are not. Regama took me 2 months. I wrote Dregs Vampire in the same amount of time as that one chapter. So again, window almost. So
no, that's awesome. And as a reader, like we can see how like that balance kind of goes from there. So I have 2 more like actual like specific questions here. I'm gonna ask one, but while I ask this one, everybody, if you have any questions, no spoilers, keep it to the books. Let's you just put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. But my question to you, Christopher, again, you watched all like the classics. You watch, Star Wars. You watch. I'm sure you watch Dune. I'm sure you watch all these different sci-fi books that get adapted into TV shows, get adapted into movies. If given the opportunity, how would you envision Sun Eater series? This is my question, Aaron. How would you? This is my question. Everybody's asking the question. How would you see? Like, do you want this to be adapted into a film or TV show?
If it was done well, yes, right. If it was, if it was the Aragon movie, maybe not. I was just picking on that movie earlier. But I was talking to my dad. Because he had the same question. He was like, "Has there been an update about all this?" And I was like, no. I haven't heard from the West Coast in my life. So
wow.
No, nothing from Hollywood. And that's fine. I always say the object of literature is not to become cinema, right?
Yeah, true. Very true.
I like books are awesome. Like I would love to see something, right? My like if I were emperor for a day, right, like of the world and could make this happen, my dream version of Sun Eater would be to get Mamoru Oshii, who did the original Ghost in the Shell film, to do Sun Eater as an anime. But whether that's a film or a TV series, I don't really care. I love cinema, right? Like I love going to the movie theater. I love watching a movie. Yeah. We live in an age of like prestige TV, but I would much rather go to the theater. So like that would be sort of my dream. Yeah. I'd rather do a movie than do a TV series. But I would rather do animation than either. I have a deep affection for animation. Yeah. And of course, like that's I remember see people are talking about Sanderson. I remember him saying some point that like really he wants live action because that's a much bigger market. Like I don't need a bigger market. I need the right market.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great fit personally. But I have like no ability to control this, right? So yeah. If something comes along and it feels like the right move, I'll say yes. If it's the wrong move, I'll say no. And I'm not shy about saying no. I've said no to not adaptations, but I've said no to like job offers, to write for some property or another before I didn't want to do. I'm not shy about saying I'm not doing that. Yeah. But if it's the right thing, I'll do it for sure.
Yeah. No, I love that. And me while reading it, like I pictured, I think I said I pictured a TV show actually. Like I would love to see this like having many seasons, if I remember correctly. Like Hadrian on a big screen would be absolutely on the TV show, absolutely amazing. And I feel like they're gonna come knocking. Like this series is so crazy. So a couple more questions. I'm gonna roll through it. You can answer them or not because I don't know if some of them are flushed out or not, but somebody asked, what's the name of the final book? Are you going to be able to get that out?
It's Shadows Upon Time.
Shadows Upon Time.
Yeah. It is, I can say a little bit more. It's 70% done.
Okay, yeah.
I've written 60 chapters. Okay. So it's probably going to be about 85, 90 chapters at the moment. Okay. I'm going to try to cut it down because it's really, really long. It's already longer than Disquiet Gods, and I have 30% to go. Okay. Just to give you a sense of how long this damn book is. Yeah. It is killing me. And it'll probably be out late next year, November, December, probably. Yeah. I hoping to finish it by the end of this year, but we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully I'm not distracting you from that.
No, I can't write in the evenings. I'm a morning guy. So yeah. Okay. It's all over. Today was pretty fried. I'm not gonna lie. I got like 1,000 words done, which is half of what I wanted. But yeah. I'm working on fulfilling. Actually, I have them here. I'm working on fulfilling the Kickstarter edition.
There you go.
And I'm packing all the boxes myself, which is what's taking so long. Yeah. I was doing that instead. So
yeah.
Blame the people who bought that.
We could be getting Sun Eater finale end of next year.
Yeah, unless something goes really, really wrong, you'll get it. And if it's delayed, it'll be to so publishing is 3 seasons. It's January to April, May to August, and September to December. Okay. It'll be moved to the spring season, which are those first 4 months. Got it. It won't be publishing. They plan in those 4-month blocks. Yeah. Usually what they'll do is they'll like, hey, what do we have that's huge, right? And they'll plan that 4-month block around whatever the major release is, right? The reality is if it's not like November, it'll be like March because like with the box office January and
Yeah.
February are not great
Yep.
months. So,
Yeah.
but it won't be delayed by too much. If it's delayed at all, it'll just be to March or something.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. We'll be waiting. All right. Waiting. All right. So quick. Have you read Red Rising?
I have not. I
Okay.
did not know it existed until I started getting compared to it.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
I think everybody
I
knows my opinion on it, but I won't say it on here. But everybody knows my opinion on where I rank the either or. But
yeah, cool.
yeah, everybody knows my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Pierce Brown seems like a cool dude.
Yeah.
But at this point, I know he said the same thing. Like, I'm not going to read it until well
Yeah.
after I'm done. I don't want to.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to touch it. It sounds neat though. Sounds
Yeah.
neat.
My buddy Krontas says Sanderson is known for his Sanderlands. Would it be fair to call the end of your books the Rockio slide?
Yeah, I've heard Rock Slide. Yeah, I think it's good.
Rock slide.
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite novella and what's your favorite short story?
Of mine or like ever?
Let's do of yours. Yeah, let's do of yours.
Of mine, I think my favorite of the novellas is Queen of Mid-Ashes. It's the
Okay.
shortest one, and it's the only one that technically qualifies as a novella. The other
Okay.
two, if they were up for awards, would be novels. They're just short. There's
Got
this
it.
weird dead space. Novellas for the Hugo Award cut off at 40,000, but publishers won't buy anything that's shorter than 80 anymore.
Okay.
So there's this dead space in there, and Dregs and Lesser Devil fall in that dead space.
Got it.
But I love Queen of Mid-Ashes. I wrote it really quick, and I tend to like the things that I write super fast, just because I have like a very clear sense of what I'm doing all the time, and I feel like more plugged in. That's part of the reason I'm trying to not write these gigantic books anymore, is I start to feel very divorced from them. I've been writing Shadows at this point for 11 months, which is about the longest I've ever written anything.
Oh, wow.
And it's I had to take a couple breaks to deal with Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
Other things. And so it's it's been a bit more of a struggle, but you start to like forget details, and that makes the edit harder, and it just makes the whole thing more onerous.
Got it.
So I love Queen of Ashes. Also, like, the villain is very different, which is fun. She's a different sort of problem. And short story is harder. I said yesterday I was on another interview with Nerd Level Rising, and I said it was Knowledge, which is my very shortest story. It's like 5 pages.
Wow.
Because I wrote it in one sitting, and it just all came together, and it was very exciting. It's also very like comparative mythology, right? Like, it does a lot of that history confusion stuff that I do, where it's like, oh, like we know about the Buddha. He like pulled Excalibur out of a stone, right? And like, no, he didn't. But like, I like messing with stuff like that. So that was a fun story. But I also I really like there's one I did for Tales of Sun Eater 3 called Daughter of Swords. That's about Hadrian and Cassandra. That I just think was really fun. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Graphic novel adaptation. What about a graphic novel?
I would love to. I've written exactly one comic thing ever. I did a 10-page story for Marvel with Thor because Steve McGibbon is a friend of mine. And he invited me, and it was super fun. I had a great time, sort of learning the Marvel method, right? I would love to write one. It wouldn't be an adaptation, maybe. I think I'd do an original story, but that I haven't gotten there yet. No.
Got it. Somebody asked me, was I able to snag those broken binding editions? I was not, unfortunately. Somebody asked that question.
Yeah, well, they're reprinting. They don't know how many yet. It might be as many as 5,000 more sets. They were pretty shocked at. They thought 3,000 would be plenty, but y'all showed up, which I am very grateful for. So
that's awesome. All right, so a few more. I'll try to get to some good ones. They're all good, but I gotta try to get to some with the
I'm in no hurry. If you're not, I'm cool.
Oh no, I'm not. Well, let's get to them. All right, so. What genre are you looking to write into? Are you going to stay in sci-fi, fantasy, or after you're done? And that was kind of my last question, so we can kind of go from there. My last prepared question. I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
But, what genre are you looking to get into? Are you going to stay in sci-fi, fantasy, or are you going to branch out to other ones?
I mean, I'll stay in science fiction and fantasy. I mean, I might get more historical with it, but the thing about fantasy and like I said earlier, I kind of think fantasy and science fiction are the same genre. I think they're all fantasies, right? Especially now, right? Like, magic is getting increasingly scientific and technical. It's becoming. It's not really magic anymore, right? The convergence is getting stronger. But really, like, science fiction is a fantasy for sort of a different worldview, right? it's a forward-looking sort of imagination instead of like fantasy is more romantic, right? It's more backward-looking, even if it's contemporary, right? It's like looking back to folk tales and things like that. But it's still doing the same thing. And what it's doing, what they both do, is they take sort of the symbolic world that we sort of imagine, right? And they make things like literal, right? Like you read Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, the like Hannibal Lecter book. There's a dragon in that book, right? But it's a serial killer, right? But he is a dragon, right? Like, you know, he acts like a dragon, right? You know, like, what is a dragon, right? It's the ultimate predator, right? It's, you know, it's part cat, it's part bird, it's part snake, it's part fire, it's part, you know, evil dude because it's hoarding wealth and women, right? You know, so fantasy like makes that literal though, right? There's a famous story, Tolkien went to see Macbeth, and you know, Birnam Wood is coming to Dunsinane Hill. They cut all the branches down, and you know, he's like, it'd be way cooler if it was actually the trees, though, right? And he's right. It would be way cooler if it was actually the trees. And so fantasy like takes that world we feel like we live in, right? You know, I had this joke on panels. I'm like, vampires exist, and like I'm like very serious about it. Like, no, they're real, bro. Like, I stretch it as long as I can, and I'll say like, and like you've all dated one, and everyone's like, oh, right, of course. Right. Like, but that's what the vampire is, right? Like it is describing a reality, right? Like vampires do exist, right? And you've dated one. And you know, and so fantasy like makes it all real. And so this is all me saying like fantasy is more real, right, than normal like regular literature, right? It engages with the world we feel like we live in, right? More directly, right, than most standard literature does, right? And because there's this sort of it's not really like a metaphorical dimension to life, right? Like we feel like that's real, right? We live in we don't live in the objective world. We live in our sort of perceptual sort of interface between our head and reality. And so I love fantasy for this reason, right? I love science fiction for this reason. And so I'm never going to leave. But I might like something might be more fantastic or less or something. But I think the next thing, sorry, this is all to say, I think the next thing will be more fantasy.
More fantasy. Oh, I would love, you know me, I'm gonna love that. I'm gonna love that.
Yeah, I'm excited. Actually, you can read it now, or at least what I hope will be the next thing. We'll see how the publisher feels. I did a fantasy short story for Galaxy Magazine. It's on galaxysf.com. It's free. It's called The Barrow King. It is in issue 263, which might still be their most recent issue, so it should be on the homepage. And it's in there. You can read it for free. You can get a print copy if you want. Galaxy is one of those old pulp magazines for back in the day. They just got rebooted, and I got to be in the new issue. Thought it'd be fun to do. And so it's in there. You can read it now. And there's another story come out soon. I forget when, that I did with the same character. So got a bit of a Conan Aragorn thing going on.
I gotta check that out. Check that out. Name in the Wind, was that a major inspiration for book one?
I would say it was a minor inspiration. I was already planning on doing the first person thing because what happened was I've been writing third person multi point of view for a long time. I wanted to sort of do the Game of Thrones format, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. And I got to this point midway through college where I'm like, man, I need to get serious because like time actually is not infinite. And I like cleared the decks and I started over, and I needed to do something to like make it feel like I was really starting over with a new idea. And I moved to first person to get to do that, right? To make a clean break with tradition and start over, to tell myself that I was being more serious. That was around the time I think I read those books. And then I ended up at DAW, and my editor was at the time was very excited to sort of try and make me the their like sci-fi alternative. And she was like, you should like lean into that more. And I think that was mostly maybe not the best advice I ever got. Because if I get some criticism, it's like, man, this guy really likes Name of the Wind. And I actually have only read it twice. I like it, but you know, it wasn't like a huge influence on my life or anything like that. Not the way that like Lord of the Rings was or Dune or something. But I do like it very much. So
got it. Christian Amadiacs, no spoilers, but is Demon in White gonna hurt my feelings? I'm scared.
No, I think Demon in White is probably the least likely.
I think so too.
I think you're all right for now.
Keyword on the for now.
Yes, you're closer to disaster than you think at all times, of course. But I think you should be okay for the moment. So
got it. What is your biggest fear? What's his biggest fear was pursuing? So what's your biggest fear of pursuing a career of writing?
Um, like starting out,
Yeah.
just that it wouldn't happen. I really set up for this with no net. I got an English degree, which was like, man, no backup plan already. Great,
Hmm.
starting strong.
Yeah.
And if I had not backed into my publishing job at Bain, I wouldn't really have had a plan on graduation.
Okay.
So I was really putting all of my eggs into this basket, and I think what I really did basically was like not give myself enough room to fail.
Hmm.
Because if it wasn't going to work out, I was going to still be waiting tables. And like, I kind of like waiting tables. Like, I'm not looking down on that. I did that
Yeah.
for 7 years. I love service. I love the restaurant industry, but like, I wasn't going to realistically do that forever. I wasn't
Yeah.
waiting tables at a level where like, that's life, right? I wasn't working
Yeah.
at like a Michelin place or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Although that'd be cool.
Yeah.
But I like needed to make it work. So my big
Yeah.
fear was that it wasn't, and I'd like look a fool. I mean, I remember, so like I started querying. This is 2015. I finished the book in like March, so like April probably. I started talking to agents, and I got 51 rejections
Ooh.
between then and November, and
Yeah.
that's actually like a pretty middling number. I know people have hit 3 digits.
Oh wow.
Um, and of that 51, only 3 people said they wanted to see the book at all.
Oh
Everything else was
wow.
like a no, or it's like online dating, right? It's like swipe nothing, nothing, nothing,
Yeah.
nothing, nothing, nothing. No, it's demoralizing, right?
Yeah.
So like 3 replies actually is probably pretty good.
Okay.
But like it sucks, right? And so like that whole stretch of months, what was that, like 8, 9 months? Like I was calling my parents like every other night coming home from the restaurant, like, man, it's not gonna happen. And it's
Yeah.
like, we need to go to bed, man. Like
Yeah.
you left work at 11 o'clock, like it's
Yeah.
way past my bedtime.
Yeah.
So, but it eventually it did work out, and when it did, it happened really fast. I mean,
Yeah.
I got an agent in November of that year, and it was like the same day I sent her an email that morning, just a letter, right, cover letter, and like 3 p.m. that afternoon, I was working at the publishing house. I was filing stuff, and I got an email. I was like, I wanted to see the first chapter. Sent that to her. I went to dinner, and I was in the parking lot, and she emailed again, want to see the whole thing. It was like another week, and she's like, "Yep, I'm signing you." It happened real fast, and then we had a contract by mid-January, so
Then
it was,
your life just, man, that's like persistence. That's crazy. Like we only see, to audience, we only see the 6 books that are out right now, but we don't know what, like, I didn't know that story. That's
yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, 51 rejections is a lot. I was trying to do the Stephen King thing and like be cool and put them all on the wall, but I got to
Yeah.
like 10 and I was like, no, those are coming down or I am going up.
Yeah.
It's not that was not a healthy decision.
Yeah.
But then after that it was I mean, it was still not like smooth, right? My
Yeah.
editor
Yeah.
quit like 9 months later, the one who picked me up. And it was like 6 months before they found a new person to take the books over. And
Yeah. Oh.
that's why it was 2 years to get the book out. And then after that it was relatively smooth until book 4. But
Yeah.
it's difficult, right?
Yeah.
But we're in a good spot now. And I think perversely all the difficulties I've had trying to get the series done kind of like help make people notice that it's happening at all, right? There's been
Yeah.
news, and that's fun.
Yeah.
People are like, "What's this drama under this rock?" And I'm like, yeah, "Put it back down."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. All right.
yeah,
Let's see what couple more I can get with here. All right. Let's see. I want to get to all these, but I have a few questions left, just a few like rapid fire ones left. But I think I'll ask one more from here that I saw.
yeah,
Where was this? I'm scrolling. And I think this is a good one. So Sun Eater's coming to an end.
yeah,
What's next? Like I know you said you want to stay in fantasy, but like
yeah.
what worlds are we thinking, or are we just so locked into finishing this story? Like what are we talking about there?
Well, partly that's up to the publisher as far as like novels are concerned,
Okay.
right? But I'm really liking the Barrow King setting, and so if they'll take it, I want to do that. I'm pretty
Okay.
excited to do that. It's also That's
You got
also like
somebody shouting out
more.
the Barrel King, by the way. Somebody said the Barrel King is really good in the chat.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I everybody who's read it really liked it so far, which is good.
yeah,
I've talked to Mean Game. I have a lot of strong opinions about fantasy, so
yeah,
I gotta deliver.
yeah,
We'll see how it goes.
yeah.
But I really like that one. The second story is I hate to be that guy. It's on my Patreon if people want to see it. It's gonna come out soon. I just don't know what month yet.
Plug it, man, plug
So,
it.
it's there. That one's much longer. It's like 20,000 words. It's almost a novella.
Okay.
So people want to check that one out. I had a great time writing those two stories.
Yeah.
It was nice to take a break and do something different. But yeah, so it'll probably be that. I do plan on never abandoning the Sun Eater universe. Hadrian's
Yeah.
story is done. But there's there's a lot of
this is
work.
what the people want to hear.
Yeah, there's a lot of work world building. I
Yeah.
see no reason to reinvent the galaxy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I'll go back and forth. I think I'm entering the phase after this where I won't do another big 7-book like
Yeah.
250,000 words a book thing for a minute.
Yeah.
I got little kids and I want to do stuff that's more manageable. So which for me is probably like 200,000 words. So like
Yeah.
Ash's man sized. That's fine. That's cool.
Yeah.
I won't put 80 chapters in the outline again. I've learned my lesson. I'll put 40 and it'll end up being 55 and that'll be a good sign. So, and I'll do a bunch of, I think, standalone things. Cause like, we've seen this universe through a keyhole, right? And, like we maybe get some other inputs on what the galaxy's like. I think it'd be nice. That. And, there's thousands of years of time and lots of space. So
yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that so much. So first off, the questions everybody asked was great. And thank you for answering all my questions here. Like, this was amazing. I always end this with, again, we know you as an author. We know you as somebody who writes some great books. Let's kind of know you, not going too deep into stuff. This is like some fun questions. It's not like asking too many crazy questions, but there's some rapid fire questions I have for you. If you weren't a writer, what would you be doing?
I really don't know. This is like the only thing I ever seriously like pushed at. I talked about food stuff. I like entertain a dream. There's like a parallel universe somewhere where I like went into the whole being a chef thing and like worked hard at that.
Okay.
I'm a big Marco Pierre White fan. I admire him very much.
Okay.
But I don't know. I did no work in that direction. Like I just think it'd be cool. Like it's a lot of work. I know how much work it is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't scare me.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched The Bear, but I watched The Bear. And that's a lot of work. I
watched a little bit. I started getting flashbacks. So
yeah. Dream vacation spot.
Iceland.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
That'd be cool.
What fictional character would you grab a drink or a coffee with?
That's a good question. Gandalf seems cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Keep pushing. You can depend on yourself.
Yeah.
Like it turns out, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
More on you than you think.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I just want to repeat that. Like, just keep pushing. It always turns out. And my final one before I let you go, and we'll definitely email and talk back and forth. I finished Kings of Death. I have to read Ashes of Man, which I put on my list of something I have to finish this year. Ashes of Man, and then I have the Squad Gods. I'll get to that next year, leading up to book 7. But if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, teleportation all day.
I love that.
I would save so much time. I love traveling, but I hate going places.
Yeah.
I just want to. I'm temperamentally a hobbit, so
yeah.
But I want to go see. I want to go see Rome. I want to go see the pyramids, whatever. Right, but I want to come right back.
Yeah.
All the rest of the traveling, no thanks. But
yeah. I was thinking about this random thing one time. I was stuck in traffic, and I was like, everybody should have at least one teleportation to and from a place per year. Like, whether you're using traffic, whether you need to get somewhere all across the world because your family needs it, we just get one. Again, I don't know what world that is, but like it should be one time use per year, and you use it on whatever you want to use it on. I think that would solve a lot of issues. But again, we got to build that world.
Yeah. As long as it's not the Star Trek version, because I don't want it to just kill me and make a new me every time.
Right. Yeah. Very
not cool with that. But If you ever watched Heroes, like if I was like Hero, like that's
Okay.
fine. So.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Ruocchio, Mr. Sun Eater himself. This has been amazing to, talk to you. I know the audience here appreciated all your insights, you deep diving into intricacies, because we read the books, but we're also really curious about the writing process too. Really appreciate that. Everybody, if you're not familiar with Sun Eater series, there are 6 books out right now. And I know you all follow me for fire recommendations. This is one of the ones where I need you all to get to Sun Eater. And Christopher, any last words before I let you go?
Oh, just thanks for having me, man. This was awesome. Thanks to everybody for reading. I really couldn't do without you. So
Yeah.
thanks.
And as always, everyone, happy reading.
Bye.